What's up? Brandon Lilly here. I'm going to be taking a couple questions. I usually try to put the cutoff around 3, but a few always trickle in after that, so I'm going to try to get to those as well as long as I keep this somewhat timely. First question comes from David. Thoughts on higher rep work for someone who needs to gain a lot of mass, more like a bodybuilder type split to build mass? Well, if you look at a lot of great powerlifters from the past and some of the guys from today, it was a blend of both. There really wasn't the definition of, oh, I'm a bodybuilder or I'm a powerlifter. There was somewhat of a mesh. If you can even remember Arnold Schwarzenegger and Franco, they competed both in powerlifting and bodybuilding. Franco competed in powerlifting a lot longer. But there wasn't this total breakdown in I'm a bodybuilder, I'm a powerlifter, I'm a strongman, et cetera, et cetera. It was just everybody trained. So, those classifications came along a little bit later, I believe. But for me, I always do my first movement as a powerlifter, heavy and hard, and with the focus on being on one rep as a main goal. That doesn't mean I do one rep every single time. As you'll see me doing rep work on the bench and deadlift and things like that. But that first movement is to build my platform performance. My accessory work, I then become a bodybuilder, or I think like a bodybuilder. A lot of stuff in between 6 to 15 reps, 4 to 5 exercises after the main movement, and just really focus on trying to build as much muscle mass as I can, as well as preserving strength. I don't try to destroy the muscle necessarily, but I try to build the muscle up, and I don't necessarily go like a bodybuilder would to all-out failure all the time like that. I get a good amount of prescribed work in, and I move on. And that's worked really well for me. It's allowed me to grow my body from about 170, 165 pounds up to 330 pounds where I am right now. So it's a formula that's worked for me. Not necessarily saying it's for everybody. Some people can't, turn one off and turn the other on, but it's always worked well for me because that's the way I was brought up training. The guys that I trained with very early on were all very, very strong, but they wanted to have a physical appearance that matched their strength. So the next question comes from Chase Browning. How do you build leg drive for the deadlift? This is something that I needed to work on for a long time because I was such a straight leg puller. I really needed to learn to, one, change my form to the point where I was actually getting leg drive. That starts with lowering the weight and just working on form work. It's not going to come overnight, but stick with it, and it will come. Main power from the leg drive. I know that Ed Cohen has talked about single leg press. That's something that he was really, really dedicated to. That's something that I've done a lot of. I don't necessarily go with the single leg as much as I just like the dual. It's really, really comfortable, and I try to bring the weight down as slowly as possible, and then I try to explode up, kind of like, like I'm trying to jump or trying to throw the leg press off my feet. It never does because I use just enough weight to prevent that from happening. But also, I'm not one of these guys that believes you need to do a million pounds on the leg press. I think for me a common day is around 500 to 600 pounds where I'm really bringing the weight down slowly and exploding it up. My legs are pretty much destroyed after that. And one of the things that I saw when I was out in Venice Beach and I was talking to Charles Glass, I was watching him take his trainers or trainees through a workout. And these guys were massive. They were NPC level, national level bodybuilders. He had them using 2 plates on one side and 3 plates on the other. And he said they could do this easily if they did it fast. But by making them do it slowly and really squeeze the leg muscles, they're going to open up those muscle fibers, get more stimulation with less weight, less chance of injury. Now, being a powerlifter, weight does matter. But I don't want to hurt my leg or hurt my hip or something like that on a stupid leg press. So that's why I stick in the 500 to 600 range. I'm allowing myself to get a full range of motion, come all the way back to where my quads are rested upon my chest, and then I explode down with my legs. And it's built a lot of power. It's built a lot of muscle size. and I think it's kept me healthy. I think it's done a lot to increase the mobility, because that's one of the things. When I was really tight in the hips, I would just sit in the leg press and let it just creep back against my chest, and I would ease the backrest down so my legs could come back further and further and further, and that actually opened up my hips a lot. So that's what I would do. I mean, the other would be front squats or deep Olympic squats. Those two things have really, really helped me a lot, along with the leg press. But it's gonna take a dedication to really learning your form again, to where your legs actually stay under you, so you can utilize what strengths you do have. But I think once you do that, dedicating to the leg press, front squat, and Olympic squat, you're going to get a ton of leg drive that way. And then I get a question from Brad. Would you train sumo and conventional deadlift by themselves in cycles, or work them simultaneously? I've talked about this a little bit before. My best sumo pull in a meet is 765 or 785, and my best conventional deadlift in a meet is 815. So I always work them together. It might be that I alternate every other set. Like set 1 is conventional, set 2 is sumo, set 3 is conventional, set 4 is sumo. I might do the whole first movement conventional, and then do some accessory work in a sumo stance, like a 1-inch deficit or an ultra-wide sumo, things like that, just to keep it on par with my conventional. Because what happens if for some reason, it's usually you can't pull sumo and you try to pull conventional in a meet, but what if something happened where I couldn't pull conventional, but I could still manage a sumo pull? I want them to be interchangeable within a few pounds. Like I said, I'm within 30 pounds of one or the other, so I could really do either one at a pretty high level, because I've dedicated to training both of them. I don't think there's any magic science to it. The sumo is more of a technical lift, so you're probably going to want to train that with moderate weight, not necessarily going heavy with that. Explosive weights, or dynamic type weights, or repetition type weight would be the best to train the sumo if that's your off pull. I do think you can tend to go a little bit heavier on the conventional pulls if you are a sumo puller, but the sumo is just such a technical lift that I was talking to Mark Bell the other day. I think guys that get the sumo, they just get it. Like from day one, they just seem to have this inclination towards it. They don't ever have to do a whole lot of work to perfect it. It's just like they get it. And then there are guys like me who suck at sumo from the beginning, and I've worked and I've worked and I've worked and I've worked and I've worked, and it's still ugly. It's still like a half-breed, hybrid, mid-stance, low back movement for me, and it's not pretty. So it's still just a brute movement, kind of like a conventional pull, but I look more like I'm in a sumo stance. So be aware of that. If you're trying to force yourself to learn sumo, my opinion is that the guys that really get sumo get it early on. It's not something that comes like 3 years down the road, like, oh, something clicks and you've automatically perfected your sumo form. I just don't believe that. Conventional may be the way for you to go if that's what you're facing. Now, if it's a range of motion or a mobility issue, yeah, that can take some time to work out. But like I said, I still see most guys that pull sumo, they get it almost from the get-go. Next question comes from Chick. Preventing the knees coming in on a heavy squat. This is something I've been talking to several of the guys at Iron Mafia about. We talk about when you're in a defensive position, that's because something is weak. So what is causing your knees to come in? Like I tell them to try to think about a bomb. When it explodes, a bomb radiates energy outward, and that's what you want to really do in a squat. And when you're going down in the hole, you want your knees out. You want your chest big. You want to be as powerful and as big as you can. And then when you come up out of the hole, you want to expand even more. You want to explode outward. So what I see a lot of guys doing is they try to force themselves into this wider stance, and then their hips and their hamstrings and their glutes just aren't strong enough to do that. So their knees cave back in towards their quads, because their quad can get them through the range of motion. It's my belief that if that's what's happening to you, you might want to narrow your stance a little bit and really focus on pushing your knees out because when you narrow your stance a little bit, your quads will actually do a lot of the lifting. And if you look at guys like, I think Dan Green wrote an article about that. He actually tries to allow his knees to come in some to get into the quads, and then he gets back out and finishes with the hamstrings and the glutes. But Dan is extremely strong. For most lifters, that's not ideal, I don't believe. I believe you want to try to maintain an outward knee position. Not the overextended like you see in a geared squat necessarily, but just a comfortable knee out positions. And that can come from having your toes slightly turned out. Like I said, bringing your stance in just a little bit, maybe a foot width or half a foot width if you have to. And really start teaching yourself to push your knees out on the way down, because like I've always said, a starting position that's imperfect will lead to a finishing position that's imperfect. So if you're going to try to reverse with your knees out, your knees need to be out on the way down. So try that and see if that helps. If not, you may want to go a little bit wider and try to sit back more. But ultimately, I think it's your body is defending itself from a weakness. So like I said, your hamstrings and your glutes are probably weak, or your body would stay in that position and drive through those muscles. So a few things: change your form a little bit, just slightly, but also strengthen your hamstrings and your glutes. Jan Hicks says, what are your thoughts on short rest periods between sets like Kaz used to train? I think if anybody would watch me train or has trained with me, I love short rest periods. I think it goes back to the 365 strong mentality of being able to do things when you really shouldn't be able to do them. On a truly, truly heavy day, we might rest 2 to 3 minutes between a set. On a lot of our lighter days, it's maybe a minute tops. And then I know you've seen our explosive deadlifts. We'll each pull, because we do them in a tandem, we'll do 8 to 12 deadlifts in under a minute at 2 people. So it's pull, he pulls, I pull, he pulls, I pull, he pulls. So you're getting maybe 3 to 5 seconds rest, in between those pulls. And I think that's carried me through a lot. It's allowed me to push my body weight up and stay somewhat lean. But at the meets, I notice that I have a lot more energy than a lot of the guys, and I do contribute to the way that we train, using the shorter rest periods and things like that. Last question is from Dustin Reed. It says, I work a full-time job where it's very hard to eat, say, 5 to 6 meals a day. I'm currently trying to add size, so is it okay or feasible to only eat 2 to 3 very large but clean meals a day and make everything still work? Well, here's my thing. It all comes down to what you're willing to give. If you're trying to gain weight and you want to slow down your metabolism, 2 to 3 meals is going to work. You're probably going to add some body fat. But the other side of the coin is 5 to 6 meals. I used to do the same thing when I worked a job that was, 10 to 12 hours a day. I had tons of customer interaction. It was very difficult to get away. But when you look at it in the big scheme of things, you're talking about 5 to 6 meals. And you're not going to eat all those while you're at work. So if you can have breakfast right when you wake up, and then maybe have a shake on your way to work, that's going to give you 2 to 3 meals while you're at work, and have one when you get home. And from there, if it takes you more than 2 to 3 minutes to eat a meal, then maybe you need to resize your meals. I know that's one thing that when I started working with John Meadows, I was a guy that would always get, like a 12, 16-ounce steak. And I'm looking at his portion sizes, and they're, sometimes 5 ounces, sometimes 6 ounces, and a big piece of steak was 8 ounces. And I'm thinking, wow, what have I been doing wrong? But if you cut that up, it doesn't look like very much. You can wolf that down in 2 to 3 minutes. And, the simple answer is it's just going to take a dedication to you taking the time, even if you have to eat it cold. I've done that. It's not fun, but, is it worth it? Are your goals worth the little bit of sacrifice, to eat 2 to 3 times at work or 4 times at work, 2 to 3 minutes a time, eating cold food, having to sneak and do it. I mean, I remember sneaking in the bathroom to eat. It's funny they won't allow you to take a food break, but they'll allow you to take a bathroom break or a cigarette break. So, when a guy would say he was going to smoke, I might say I was going outside with him. I'd go grab my food and I'd stand back there and eat real quick, or I would just go to the bathroom and eat. It was whatever I had to do. I mean, that's just kind of the mentality that I have. Nobody's going to stop me from getting my goals. So, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for asking the questions. And I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Thanks.